Back in 1981, 17-year-old Keanu Reeves was just a kid fixing bikes in a rundown Toronto shop, scraping by to help his mom. One rainy day, he spots Tommy, an 8-year-old with a busted wheelchair, crying his eyes out. His single mom, Maria, helpless beside him. Keanu doesn't hesitate. He kneels down, promises to fix it, no charge. He works late, skips paying jobs, even dips into his own pocket to make that chair better than ever. Tommy rolls off grinning, Maria's in tears, and Keanu thinks, that's that. But 2 days later, a sleek plane lands, a rich stranger steps out, and everything flips. What starts with a broken wheel spins into a wild offer and a chance meeting that lands Keanu on a stage, lighting the spark for a Hollywood legend. Stick around. This one's unreal. Keanu Reeves was just a teenager with grease-stained hands, hunched over a bike in a cramped Toronto shop. He wasn't chasing fame or dreaming of spotlights. Those thoughts never crossed his mind. All he cared about was keeping the lights on at home, helping his mom after his dad walked out. The gig wasn't glamorous, just a part-time hustle fixing pedals and chains, but it was his. Keanu liked the work, figuring out what was broken, making it right. It kept him steady, gave him purpose when everything else felt shaky. Then came Tommy. Keanu was wiping down his tools when he heard the kids sobbing outside. One look told him everything. An 8-year-old stuck in a beat-up wheelchair, front wheel snapped clean off. The boy's mom, Maria, hovered nearby, worn out and desperate. Keanu didn't think twice. He dropped to one knee, flashed a quick smile, and said, "Don't worry, buddy, I'll fix it." Maria tried to protest, fumbling for cash she didn't have, but Keanu waved her off. "No charge," he said firmly, already rolling the chair inside. He knew the shop was low on parts, knew he'd be burning extra hours, but that didn't matter. This wasn't about money. As he tinkered, Keanu's mind drifted. He'd been Tommy once, not in a wheelchair, but trapped all the same. Kids at school used to rag on him, calling him names because his clothes were secondhand, his family barely scraping by. He'd quit school to work, trading textbooks for wrenches, and some days it still stung. Looking at Tommy, clutching those armrests with tears streaking his face, hit Keanu hard. He got it, the frustration, the unfairness. No kid should feel stuck like that. Maria's voice broke his thoughts. "I can't afford a new one," she admitted, her tone heavy. "Insurance won't cover it, and the system doesn't care about people like us." Keanu tightened a bolt, jaw clenched. He'd seen it before. Folks like Maria and Tommy left to fend for themselves. No safety net, no help. It wasn't right, and it fueled him. He wasn't just patching up a wheelchair. He was pushing back against a world that didn't give a damn. By the time he finished, Keanu's hands were raw, but the chair rolled smooth, better than it ever had. Tommy's eyes lit up as he gave it a push, and Maria grabbed Keanu's hand, gratitude spilling out. "You don't know what this means," she said, voice cracking. Keanu just shrugged, brushing it off. "It's what I do, fix things." He watched them head off, tired but satisfied, figuring that was the end of it. But something bigger was already in motion, something he couldn't see coming. One small act, one broken wheel, was about to turn his whole life upside down. Keanu wheeled Tommy's chair into the shop, the squeak of its busted frame cutting through the quiet. He set it down and crouched low, running his fingers over the damage. It wasn't just the front wheel, snapped clean off like a broken promise. The whole thing was a mess, frame bent sideways, brake dangling useless, worn down by time and neglect. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. This wasn't a patch job, it was a rebuild. But when he glanced back at Tommy, still sniffling outside, and Maria's helpless stare, he knew he couldn't walk away. "Gonna take some time," he muttered to himself, grabbing a wrench, "but I'll get it done." The shop's shelves were a graveyard of spare parts. Bent spokes, rusted chains, nothing close to a full wheel. Keanu didn't blink. He dug through a pile in the back, pulling out a dented bike rim he'd kept for no good reason. It wasn't ideal, but it was something. He fired up the hacksaw, cutting and shaping, sparks flying as he worked it into a rough circle. His hands moved steady, muscle memory kicking in, but his mind was racing. This wasn't just metal and bolts. It was Tommy's legs, his freedom. He couldn't half-ass it. Hours ticked by, the world outside fading as he hammered and twisted, piecing together a fix from scraps. He didn't stop, not even when his shoulders screamed or his stomach growled. This mattered too much. He had other work, real work. A bike from Mr. Dawson sat in the corner, chain loose, waiting for a tune-up. The guy was a regular, always paid cash, and Keanu could have had it done by now. That money would have covered groceries, maybe a new pair of boots to replace the ones splitting at the seams. Instead, he let it sit, gathering dust. The boss wouldn't like it, might even yell. Threatened to cut his shifts. Keanu didn't care. He'd take the heat. And then there was the paint. He'd been saving a few bucks, stashed in a tin under the counter, dreaming of a jacket to keep the chill off, but when he saw Tommy's chair taking shape, solid but dull, he grabbed that cash, jogged to the hardware store, and came back with a can of black paint. A little shine, a little pride. Tommy deserved that. The kid was inside now, perched on an old stool, watching Keanu like he was some kind of wizard. "You're good at this," Tommy said, voice small but bright, eyes tracking every turn of the wrench. Keanu grinned, wiping sweat off his forehead. "Been at it a while, bud. Gotta make sure you're rolling smooth." Maria lingered near the door, fidgeting with her watch. "We're gonna miss the bus," she said, worry creasing her face. Keanu looked up, hands still on the frame. "This isn't just about fixing a chair," he said, voice low but firm. "It's about him getting to move like he should. You're not walking home tonight. I'll make it work." She nodded, biting her lip, trust flickering in her eyes. Time stretched thin. Keanu's fingers cramped, his back ached, but he kept going, straightening the frame, bolting on the new wheel, rigging a brake that actually held. He adjusted the seat, padding it with an old rag so Tommy could sit tall. When he finally rolled it out, the chair wasn't just fixed. It was better. Stronger, smoother, a little gleam from that fresh paint. Tommy climbed in, hesitant, then pushed. His face lit up, a laugh bursting out as he glided forward. "It's fast," he yelled, spinning in a tight circle. Maria rushed over, dropping to her knees beside him, then turned and threw her arms around Keanu. "I don't know how to thank you," she choked out, tears soaking his shirt. He stood there, awkward but warm, patting her back. Seeing him happy's enough. They stayed a minute, Tommy wheeling around, Maria wiping her eyes. "He hasn't moved like this in forever," she said, voice thick. Keanu watched the kid, hands in his pockets, feeling something swell in his chest. "He deserves to run with the others," he said quietly, "even if it's on wheels." It wasn't just words, it was a promise, one he'd felt in his bones. He knew what it was like to be pinned down, to watch the world move past you. Growing up, he'd been the odd kid out, poor. No money, no name, just heart. He'd fought to keep going when people laughed him off, when they didn't see him. Fixing Tommy's chair wasn't about proving anything, it was about righting a wrong, giving a kid a shot the system wouldn't. Maria had said it herself, no insurance, no help, just doors slammed shut. Keanu got that, he'd lived it, scraping by, invisible to most. This was his push back, his way of saying, "Not today." He didn't know it then, locking up the shop that night, bone-tired but full, that this wasn't the end. Tommy's laugh, Maria's hug, they'd cracked something open in him, a spark he couldn't name yet. He'd poured everything into that chair, time, cash, pieces of himself, and it felt right, like he'd found a piece of what he was meant for. But as he flipped off the lights, he had no clue how big this would get. One busted wheel, one long night. It was about to roll him into a future he'd never seen coming, a path that would take everything he was and turn it into something the world couldn't ignore. 2 days later, Keanu was locking up the shop, still riding the high of Tommy's grin. His hands ached from the late-night fix, but it felt good, like he'd done something that stuck. He was about to head home when a low rumble cut through the quiet. He froze, keys dangling, as a small plane touched down at the local airstrip nearby. Planes didn't come here. Not like this. Before he could process it, a shiny black car peeled out from the strip, headlights slicing through the dusk, and rolled right up to his doorstep. Keanu's stomach flipped. This wasn't normal. The driver's door swung open, and out stepped a guy in a crisp suit. Paul, all polish and purpose. Then came the real surprise. An older man, silver hair, sharp eyes, stepping out like he owned the ground beneath him. James Carter, he said his name was, voice steady and deep. Keanu just stared, caught off guard. "You're the kid who fixed my grandson's chair," James said, not asking, just stating it. "Grandson?" It clicked. "Tommy." Maria must have talked. Keanu nodded, unsure what to say. "Yeah, that's me." James didn't waste time. He sized Keanu up, not with judgment, but something heavier. Respect, maybe. "Maria told me everything," he said. "How you stayed late, used your own cash, didn't take a dime, all for a kid you didn't even know." Keanu shifted, uncomfortable with the spotlight. "It wasn't a big deal," he mumbled. But James cut him off, eyes narrowing. "It was to Tommy, and to me." Paul stepped forward then, holding out a sleek black envelope. Keanu's pulse kicked up. He took it, hands unsteady, and peeled it open. Inside was a contract, words he'd barely understood at first, but the numbers hit like a punch. A job in Montreal, running a high-tech shop building gear for people like Tommy. Pay 10 times what he made now, plus a place to live, even a shot at school. It was insane. Keanu's head spun. "Why me?" he asked, voice cracking. He wasn't anybody, just a dropout with greasy hands and a knack for fixing junk. James didn't blink. "Because you didn't do it for money," he said. "You did it because it was right." "That's rare, kid. I've got a whole operation, fancy tools, big plans, but no one with your kind of heart." Keanu clutched the paper, feeling its weight. This wasn't just a job. It was a whole new life, dropped in his lap out of nowhere. He should have been thrilled, but all he felt was a knot tightening in his chest. He thought about Tommy, how that kid's smile had lit him up inside. Then he thought about himself, stuck in this shop, scraping by, no future beyond the next paycheck. James was offering a way out, a chance to do more, be more, but it scared him stiff. Leave Toronto? Leave the only world he knew? He'd never been anywhere, never had anything handed to him like this. What if he couldn't cut it? What if he let them down? James, Tommy himself, "I don't know," he said, barely above a whisper. "I'm not some big-shot mechanic. I just fix things." James didn't push. "Think it over," he said, voice firm but kind. "But don't take too long. Opportunities like this don't wait." Paul gave a nod, and they headed back to the car, leaving Keanu standing there, envelope in hand, heart pounding. He watched the taillights fade, the plane's hum lingering in the air. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not to him. He'd spent his whole life invisible, head down, getting by. Now someone saw him, really saw him, and it shook him to his core. Alone again, Keanu sank onto a stool, staring at the contract. It wasn't just paper. It was a door. One he wasn't sure he could walk through. He'd fixed Tommy's chair because it felt right, because he knew what it was like to be trapped. Now that choice was pulling him somewhere huge, somewhere he'd never dreamed of. He wanted to say yes, to grab it, but doubt clawed at him. Could he really be the guy James thought he was, or was this just another thing he'd mess up? The answer wasn't coming, not tonight. But one thing was clear. That wheelchair wasn't the only thing he'd set in motion. Keanu didn't sleep that night. He stayed in the shop, perched on that same rickety stool, the black envelope open in front of him. The contract stared back, its clean lines and big numbers mocking his messy life. He ran his fingers over the paper, tracing the words like they'd tell him what to do. Part of him wanted to jump, say yes, chase this crazy chance. But another part, the louder one, screamed to stay put. Change scared him. Failure scared him more. He'd spent his whole life clawing to survive, and this? This was a leap he didn't know how to land. He leaned back, eyes drifting to the tools scattered around him. This shop was his anchor, small, beat up, but his. Every bike he'd fixed, every chain he'd tightened, it was proof he could handle things. Out there, in Montreal, with fancy machines and big expectations, he wasn't so sure. He pictured himself screwing up, letting James down, proving he was just a nobody after all. But then he thought of Tommy, those little hands gripping that wheelchair, the way he'd smiled like Keanu had handed him the world. That stuck with him, tugged at something deep. What if he could do that again, for more kids like Tommy? What if this was his shot to matter? The door creaked open, snapping him out of it. Tommy rolled in, steady on that rebuilt chair, Maria trailing behind with a foil-wrapped plate. "We made you something," she said, setting down a lumpy homemade cake. Keanu blinked, caught off guard. "You didn't have to," he started, but Tommy cut in, grinning. "It's to say thanks. You're my hero, Keanu." Then the kid's face got serious, eyes big and earnest. "If you go, you'll help other kids like me, right?" The words hit like a brick. Keanu's throat tightened, and he turned away quick, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. Tommy didn't know what he'd just done. Didn't know how that innocent hope cracked something open inside him. Maria sat down, her voice soft but heavy. "There's kids around here who don't even have what Tommy's got now," she said. "No chairs, no help, just stuck inside because their folks can't pay. It's not fair." Keanu's jaw clenched. He knew that unfairness, lived it. He'd seen it in his mom's tired eyes, in the way people looked through him like he didn't count. Maria kept going. "You could change that, Keanu. You've got something special," her words sank in, stirring up the anger he'd buried, the kind that burned for Tommy, for her, for every kid the world forgot. He'd fixed one chair, but what if he could fix more? What if he could fight back? He was still wrestling with it when Paul showed up the next day, suit crisp as ever. "Ready to see it?" he asked, nodding toward the car. Keanu hesitated, then grabbed his jacket. They drove to Montreal, and when he stepped into that workshop, his breath caught. It wasn't just a shop, it was a mission. Engineers hunched over designs, piecing together wheelchairs and braces, their hands moving with purpose. One guy looked up, showing off a sleek prototype. "This one's for a girl who hasn't walked in years," he said, pride in his voice. Keanu watched, heart pounding. These weren't just fixes, they were lifelines, and he could be part of it. Paul stood beside him. "This is what James sees in you," he said. "Not just skill, heart." Keanu swallowed hard, picturing Tommy's face, hearing Maria's words. He thought about his own life, broke, bruised, but still kicking. He'd always been the guy who patched things up, who kept going. Maybe this was bigger, but wasn't it the same? Fixing what was broken, giving people a shot? The fear was still there, gnawing at him, but something else grew louder. A hunger to do more, to be more. He looked around that buzzing room and felt this could be his place. Back at the car, Paul handed him a pen. Keanu held it, staring at the contract one last time. His hand shook, but not from doubt, just the weight of it all. He thought of Tommy's "You're my hero," of Maria's quiet faith, of every kid out there waiting. He signed his name, a messy scrawl, and let out a breath he'd been holding too long. "Okay," he said, voice steady. "I'm in." Paul smiled, but Keanu barely noticed. He was already somewhere else, stepping into a life he'd never imagined, one that started with a kid's broken wheel and was about to roll him somewhere huge. Keanu packed up his life in a beat-up duffel bag and moved to Montreal. The shop there wasn't like anything he'd known, no grease-stained floors or rusty tools. It was bright, buzzing with engineers who spoke in terms he barely grasped at first. But he dove in, hands-on, learning fast. They showed him blueprints for wheelchairs that weighed half as much as Tommy's old one, braces that moved like real limbs. Keanu soaked it up, tweaking designs, testing parts, making them better. Every time he handed off a finished piece, watching someone roll away with a grin or take a shaky step, he felt full, like he was finally doing something that stuck. This wasn't just fixing, it was giving people back pieces of their lives. Days turned into weeks, then months. He'd sit late in the workshop, sketching ideas, losing track of time. The pay was good, better than he'd ever dreamed, and the tiny apartment they gave him had a view he'd stare at sometimes, wondering how he'd landed here. It was more than he'd ever had, more than he'd thought he deserved, but even with all that, something nagged at him, a quiet itch he couldn't name. He loved the work, loved the purpose, but part of him, buried deep, wanted something bigger, something he couldn't yet see. Then came the day that flipped everything. Keanu was out in a park near the shop, testing a new chair he'd built, light, sturdy, with wheels that glided like butter. A kid from the neighborhood was trying it out, laughing as he zipped around. Keanu crouched beside him, adjusting the seat, asking, "How's it feel?" The boy beamed, "Like I'm flying." Keanu grinned back, that familiar warmth spreading in his chest. He didn't notice the film crew at first, not until a woman with a clipboard and a sharp gaze walked over. "You made that?" she asked, nodding at the chair. Keanu stood, wiping his hands. "Yeah, just testing it." She introduced herself. Sarah Mitchell, shooting a documentary about folks like the kid, people who'd been handed a raw deal, but kept going. Sarah watched him closer than he liked, her eyes picking up more than his words. "Mind if we get you on camera?" she asked. "Tell us about this. Why you do it." Keanu froze. Talking wasn't his thing, let alone in front of a lens. "I'm no good at that," he said, shifting on his feet. But Sarah pushed, gentle but firm. "It's not about you. It's about them, the people you help. Like that boy." She pointed to the kid, still wheeling around, free as a bird. Keanu thought of Tommy, of Maria's tears, and sighed. Okay. For them. The crew set up fast, and Keanu stood there, awkward, mic clipped to his shirt. Sarah asked simple stuff, how he got started, what the work meant. He stumbled at first, hands shoved in his pockets. But then he started talking about Tommy, how he'd found him crying, how he'd stayed up all night to fix that chair. His voice cracked when he said, "I know what it's like to feel stuck. I just wanted him to have a chance." He paused, swallowing hard, thinking of his own days. Broke, laughed at, invisible. Folks like him, they don't get enough chances. The crew went quiet. Sarah's eyes softened, and one guy behind the camera wiped his face quick. Keanu didn't see it. He was too caught up, reliving that night. When they wrapped, Sarah pulled him aside. "You've got something," she said, voice low. "The way you talk, it's real. People feel it." Keanu shrugged, brushing it off. "I was just saying the truth." She smiled like she knew something he didn't. "That's the point. Ever thought about acting?" He laughed, short, sharp, like it was a joke. "Me? No way. I fix stuff." "That's it." But Sarah didn't let it go. She knew a guy in Toronto, a theater director hunting for fresh faces. "He's doing a small play, gritty, real, you'd fit, just try it." Keanu shook his head. "I'm not that guy." She leaned in, eyes locked on his. "You don't just fix things, Keanu. You tell stories with what you do. That's rare. Trust me." Her words stuck with him, rattling around his head for days. He tried to shake it off, focus on the shop, but it wouldn't leave. Finally, he caved, called the number she'd scribbled down. The director, a gruff guy named Ed, told him to come read for a part. Keanu showed up, nerves shot, feeling like an imposter. The play was about a kid from the wrong side of town, fighting to rise up. Ed handed him the script, said, "Go." Keanu didn't act. He just spoke, pulling from his own life, his own fights. When he finished, the room was dead quiet. Ed nodded. "You're in." It started small, rehearsals in a cramped theater, a handful of seats filled on opening night. But standing there under those lights, something clicked. Keanu felt it, the rush of pouring himself out, of making people feel what he'd felt. He wasn't just fixing anymore, he was sharing. Nights turned into weeks, then more gigs, little roles, local stages. Every line he spoke carried Tommy's smile, Maria's gratitude, his own hunger to matter. He realized this was it, the bigger he'd been chasing. Acting let him tell stories like theirs, about kindness, cutting through the dark, about hope, clawing out of unfairness. The first real show came fast. Keanu stepped on stage, heart hammering, lights hot on his face. He delivered his lines, raw, honest, every word his own. The crowd leaned in, caught by the kid who'd once been invisible. When it ended, they clapped. Loud, real. And he stood there, soaking it in. Backstage, he caught his breath, a slow smile breaking through. He thought of Tommy, that busted wheel, the night that changed everything. One small fix had rolled him here, to a stage, to a life where he could reach millions, not with tools, but with his voice, his heart. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was a storyteller, and this was only the start. What hits me about Keanu's story is how one small choice, to fix a kid's chair, snowballed into a life that changed the world. It's proof that kindness isn't just a moment, it's a spark that can light up everything. I think it's a reminder we all have that power, even when we feel small. But maybe you see it differently. Maybe it's luck, not heart, that got him there. Was it fate? or just the right people noticing? I'd love to hear your take. Drop it in the comments. Huge thanks for watching this one. It means the world to share these stories with you. If this hit you like it hit me, hit that like button, subscribe, and stick around. We've got more coming. Tales of grit, hope, and the unexpected. Let's keep the conversation going.